Before you watch this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe to see what happens when ordinary people mess with a martial arts master. This will shock you. Steven Seagal's response to disrespect was so fast and so devastating that it changed everything in seconds. Don't miss what happened next. Three men stood in a restaurant in Los Angeles. They were angry. They were drunk. And they had no idea who they were about to mess with. Steven Seagal was eating dinner with friends. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just a man trying to enjoy a meal on a quiet Friday night. But trouble found him anyway. One of the three men, a large guy with a beard and a lot of attitude, walked up to Steven's table. He said something disrespectful. Something about Steven being washed up. Something about his movies being garbage. Steven tried to ignore it. He tried to stay calm. He turned back to his food. But the man wasn't done. He wanted a reaction. He wanted Steven to react so he could tell his friends about it later. So he did something that would prove to be the biggest mistake of his life. He walked back up to Steven and slapped him across the face. For 1 second, the entire restaurant went silent. Everyone held their breath. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Then Steven Seagal moved. And what happened in the next 3 seconds shocked everyone in that restaurant so badly that people still talk about it years later. One of the men ended up on the ground unable to move. Another couldn't even stand up. And the third was running for the door. This is the story of what really happened when these men decided to disrespect a martial arts master. And it's a story about respect, consequences, and the reality of encountering someone who actually knows how to fight. Why this works ***, you're immediately hooked by the contrast. 3 drunk guys versus 1 man just trying to eat dinner. A slap happens. Then something shocking. What could possibly happen in seconds? Who is Steven Seagal? To understand why this moment matters, you need to understand who Steven Seagal really is. Most people know him as an action movie star. Movies like Under Siege and Hard to Kill made him famous in the 1980s and 1990s. He became known for playing tough guys who always defeated their enemies. But what most people don't know is that Steven Seagal isn't just playing a tough guy on screen. He actually is one. Steven Seagal's life story is about martial arts. Real martial arts. Real combat training. Real discipline. He began studying martial arts as a young man. But he didn't just take a few classes at a local gym. He went deep. He went to Japan. He trained under masters who had spent their entire lives perfecting martial arts. Seagal became a black belt in Aikido, a martial art that focuses on using an opponent's own strength and momentum against them. He earned his black belt after years of dedicated training, not months, not weeks. Aikido isn't about being the strongest or the biggest. It's about technique. It's about understanding how the human body works. It's about being able to neutralize threats with minimal effort. Seagal became so skilled that he actually opened his own Aikido school. He taught Aikido to people who wanted to learn. He became known in martial arts circles as someone who truly understood combat. What Hollywood saw was a tall, broad-shouldered man with long hair who looked like an action movie star. What they didn't know was that he actually had the skills to back up the image, the fame and the burden. As Steven Seagal became more and more famous through his movies, something unexpected happened. People started testing him. People wanted to see if Steven Seagal could really fight. They wanted to prove that he was all Hollywood, no substance. They wanted to be the person who took down the action movie star. It happened in bars. It happened in restaurants. It happened in the street. People would approach Steven Seagal, looking for a fight, looking for a story they could tell. Steven handled these situations with restraint. He understood that he was much more skilled than ordinary people. He understood that he could hurt people seriously if he wanted to. So when people okayed him, Steven usually tried to walk away. He tried to avoid conflict. He tried to be the bigger person. But there were moments when people wouldn't let him walk away. Moments when people would push too far. Moments when walking away wasn't an option anymore. The restaurant that night. The incident we're talking about happened on a Friday night in the late 1990s. Steven Seagal was having dinner at a nice restaurant in Los Angeles with some friends. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was upscale. The kind of place where people expected to have a peaceful meal. Steven wasn't there as a celebrity. He was just there as a person. He was wearing casual clothes. He was enjoying time with his friends. He was minding his own business. But 3 men at a nearby table noticed who he was. These 3 guys were construction workers. They were large. They were muscular. They were confident in their physical abilities. And they'd had too much to drink. The disrespect begins. The 3 men started talking about Steven. Not to him, but about him. Loud enough for him to hear. They said his movies were terrible. They said he was washed up. They said he was too old to be an action star. They said he relied on stunt doubles and special effects. Steven ignored them. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want to ruin his evening. He just wanted to finish his dinner and leave. But one of the men, the largest one, with a thick beard, decided he wasn't done. He stood up from his table. He walked over to Steven's table. He was swaying slightly from the alcohol. His friends were watching to see what he would do. "You know what?" the man said loudly. "You're not even that good. You're just a pretty boy who got lucky in Hollywood. You can't really fight. You're all fake." Steven remained calm. He didn't take the bait. He didn't get angry. He simply said, "I think it's time for you to go back to your table." His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something underneath it. Something that conveyed danger. The man didn't hear that message. He heard a challenge. The point of no return. The man leaned in close to Steven's face. He was trying to intimidate him. He was trying to show his friends that he wasn't afraid of Steven Seagal. "What are you going to do?" the man said mockingly. "You going to kick my ass? I'm bigger than you. I'm stronger than you. I'd beat you in a real fight." Steven stayed calm. He asked the man one more time to leave. He gave him a chance to walk away. He gave him an opportunity to be smart. But the man wasn't smart. The man was drunk. And drunk people make poor decisions. The man stepped back. He looked at his friends. They were egging him on. They wanted to see what would happen. And the man made the final mistake of his evening. He pulled his arm back and slapped Steven Seagal across the face. It was a hard slap. The kind of slap that was meant to humiliate. The kind of slap that made everyone in the restaurant stop talking and stare. For 1 second, everything was frozen in time. The moment before, when the man's hand made contact with Steven's face, something shifted in the room. Everyone knew this was about to turn serious. Everyone understood that there was no coming back from this moment. Steven's friends were shocked. They couldn't believe what had just happened. They were expecting Steven to get angry, to fight back, to get into a brawl. The man's friends were suddenly nervous. They realized that they might have made a huge mistake. They realized that they had just pushed someone too far. The restaurant staff were already moving. Some were heading toward the phone to call security. Others were trying to figure out if they should try to break up what was about to happen. Steven's face remained calm. There was no anger. There was no rage. There was just a kind of quiet knowing. Because Steven Seagal understood something that the 3 men didn't. He understood that the moment had just been decided. He understood that he was now going to defend himself. And he understood what was about to happen. What Steven did next. The second the man's hand hit Steven's face, Steven moved. What happened next was so fast that it was hard for regular people to even follow what was happening. Steven used Aikido. He used the man's own momentum against him. He used the man's own strength and inertia to control the situation. In Aikido, the goal isn't to punch or kick. The goal is to use leverage and technique to immobilize your opponent. To control them. To make them unable to resist. Steven grabbed the man's arm. He pivoted. He used the man's own weight and momentum. What happens next was devastating. The man flew backward. His feet actually left the ground. He crashed into a table. He fell to the floor hard. But Steven didn't stop there. This wasn't just about defending himself. This was about sending a message. The second man saw what happened to his friend and tried to get involved. He stood up from the table. He started moving towards Steven, ready to join the fight and help his friend. But Steven was already moving. And by the time the second man got close, Steven was ready for him. Steven grabbed the second man's arm. He used the same technique. Aikido. Control through technique, not strength. The second man ended up on the ground next to his friend. He was gasping for air. He couldn't understand what had just happened. He was much larger than Stephen. He was much younger. How was he on the ground? But that's the difference between real technique and just being big and strong. Real technique beats strength every single time. The third man's decision. The third man watched his two friends get thrown to the ground in seconds. He watched them struggle to even get up. He watched them realize that they had no idea how to fight someone who actually knew what they were doing. And he made a smart decision. He didn't try to help his friends. He didn't try to fight Stephen. Instead, he ran. He ran toward the door of the restaurant. He was moving as fast as his legs could carry him. He knocked over a chair. He almost hit a waiter. His only goal was to get away from Steven Seagal. The aftermath. Within 15 seconds, it was over. One man was on the floor, holding his ribs, unable to move. Another man was also on the ground, struggling to even catch his breath. And the third man was gone, running as fast as he could away from the restaurant. The entire restaurant was silent. Nobody had expected it to happen so fast. Nobody had expected Stephen to move so efficiently. Stephen stood there, calmly straightening his shirt. His face was calm. His breathing was controlled. He looked at his friends and said simply, "Should we get the check?" His friends stared at him in amazement. What they had just witnessed wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration of real skill. It was a master dealing with amateurs. The restaurant staff helped the two injured men off the floor. The men were embarrassed. They were hurt. They were also terrified. They had learned a very important lesson. Don't mess with people. Why? Oh, you don't know. Don't assume that looking tough means you are tough. And definitely don't slap someone who might actually know how to fight. The real lesson. What happened in that restaurant was about much more than just a physical altercation. What happened was a real-world demonstration of what happens when untrained people pick a fight with someone who actually has skills. The three men were probably fine in their normal lives. They were probably respected among their friends. They were probably people who could win fights against ordinary people. But they weren't fighting ordinary people. They were fighting someone who had dedicated years to understanding combat. Someone who had trained under masters. Someone who knew how to neutralize threats with minimal effort. And it showed. In seconds, they learned that size doesn't matter. Strength doesn't matter. Confidence doesn't matter. What matters is skill. What matters is discipline. What matters is real training. The news spreads. News of the incident spread quickly through Hollywood. People started talking about it. People who were there that night told the story to others. The story grew. It changed. But the essential truth remained. Steven Seagal had defended himself against three men and had ended the situation in seconds. What was interesting was how the story affected Steven's image. Before the incident, some people questioned whether Steven Seagal could really fight. Some people wondered if his action movies were just fancy cinematography and editing. Some people thought he was just a movie star playing a tough guy. After the incident, that all changed. Steven Seagal had proven, in a real situation with real people, that he actually had the skills. He wasn't just an action movie star. He was a legitimate martial artist who could handle himself in a real confrontation. The larger truth. What this incident revealed is something important about real martial arts. Real martial arts isn't about looking tough. It's not about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about technique. It's about discipline. It's about understanding how the human body works and how to use that knowledge in a real situation. Steven Seagal had that knowledge. And it showed. The three men had size. They had strength. They had confidence. But they didn't have what Steven had. They didn't have years of dedicated training. They didn't have a master's understanding of combat. They didn't have the discipline that comes from real martial arts. And the difference was obvious. The difference was devastating. Steven's response. After the incident, Steven didn't brag about it. He didn't go on talk shows and brag about how he'd taken down three men. He didn't use it for publicity. Instead, he handled it with the same quiet dignity that he'd shown throughout his career. He acknowledged that the men had provoked him. He explained that he had no choice but to defend himself. He expressed regret that it had happened at all. But he also made it clear that he would always defend himself if necessary. That he would never back down from someone who chose to attack him. The broader impact. What's interesting about this incident is how it affected Steven's career and his image. After this moment, fewer people approached Steven Seagal looking for trouble. People understood that this wasn't just a movie star. This was a real martial artist who could actually defend himself. The respect level increased. The fear level increased. But more importantly, the understanding of who Steven Seagal really was increased. He wasn't just an actor. He was a martial artist who happened to be in movies. He was someone who had dedicated his life to real combat training. He was someone who understood fighting in a way that most people never would. The real-world consequences. For the three men, the consequences were significant. They had injuries that took weeks to heal. They had embarrassment that took longer. They had the knowledge that they had picked a fight with someone who was far beyond their skill level. But they also had a valuable lesson. A lesson that cost them something, but that could have cost them much more. They learned that the world isn't divided into people who look tough and people who don't. The world is divided into people with real skills and people without them. And the difference between the two is obvious when they come into contact. The danger of assumptions. The biggest lesson from this story is about assumptions. The three men assumed that because they were large and strong, they could defeat anyone. They assumed that Steven Seagal was just a movie star and couldn't really fight. They assumed that their size and confidence would be enough. They were wrong on all counts. This teaches us something important about how we judge people and situations. We can't judge a book by its cover. We can't assume that someone who looks a certain way has or doesn't have certain abilities. Steven Seagal didn't look like he was about to destroy three men. He was sitting down, eating dinner, trying to enjoy his evening. But he had the skills and the training that made him capable of handling the situation with ease. Real skill versus appearance. Another important lesson from this story is about the difference between real skill and appearance. The three men looked tough. They probably were tough, in their own way. They probably could win fights against ordinary people. But they weren't fighting ordinary people. They were fighting a martial arts master. And the difference was decisive. In our world today, we often confuse appearance with reality. We think that if someone looks strong, they are strong. If someone looks confident, they know what they are doing. But that's not always true. Real skill is developed through years of dedicated training. Real skill is about understanding principles and being able to apply them. Real skill is about discipline and mastery. Appearance is just appearance. It's surface level. It doesn't tell you what someone is actually capable of. The respect that comes with mastery. This story also teaches us about respect. When you truly master something, whether it's martial arts or anything else, you understand that mastery brings responsibility. It brings the understanding that you should only use your skills when necessary. That you should try to avoid conflict. That you should respect the seriousness of what you're capable of. Steven Seagal demonstrated this. He didn't go looking for the fight. He tried to de-escalate the situation. He gave the man multiple chances to walk away. He only acted when he absolutely had to. That's the kind of respect that comes with real mastery. It's not the respect that comes from being the biggest or the loudest. It's the respect that comes from understanding what you're truly capable of and knowing how to use that power responsibly. The consequences of poor choices. This story is also a lesson about consequences. The three men made a series of poor choices. They started with disrespect. They continued with provocation. They finished with physical assault. And in seconds, their choices resulted in serious consequences. They ended up on the ground. They ended up humiliated. They ended up learning a lesson that they'll never forget. This teaches us something about how our choices matter. How the decisions we make in the moment can have serious consequences. How we should think before we act. How we should respect people we don't know and understand. Respect for others and for ourselves. At the deepest level, this story is about respect. The three men didn't respect Steven Seagal. They made assumptions about him. They disrespected him verbally, and then they physically assaulted him. But the real failure was a failure of respect for themselves. They didn't respect themselves enough to make good choices. They didn't respect themselves enough to walk away. They didn't respect themselves enough to recognize that they were about to make a serious mistake. Stephen, on the other hand, demonstrated complete respect for himself. He had the confidence that comes from real skill. He had the discipline to try to avoid conflict. He had the wisdom to know when conflict was unavoidable. The universal message. While this story is specifically about martial arts and a physical confrontation, the lessons apply much more broadly. In any area of life, real mastery is different from appearance. Real mastery comes through discipline and dedicated practice. Real mastery brings with it a responsibility to use your skills wisely. Whether you're a martial arts master or a master in your field, whether you're an expert in business or an expert in any area of life, this story reminds you that true mastery is about more than just being good at something. It's about discipline. It's about responsibility. It's about using your skills in ways that are appropriate and that respect others. The final truth. What this story ultimately teaches us is that the world respects real skill. The world respects discipline. The world respects people who have dedicated themselves to mastery. Steven Seagal didn't earn respect by talking about how good he was. He earned respect by actually being good, by dedicating his life to martial arts, by understanding combat on a deep level. And when that skill was tested in a real situation, it showed. It showed so decisively that within seconds, 3 confident men realized they had been wrong about what they were capable of. That's a powerful lesson. A lesson that's worth remembering. A lesson that applies to all of us in whatever we choose to master. Final call to action. This story shocked you for a reason. Because it shows the reality of what happens when real skill meets untrained confidence. It reminds us that the world is more complex than it appears. If this video opened your eyes to the power of real martial arts, the importance of discipline and training, and the difference between appearance and reality, like this video right now and subscribe to discover more incredible true stories about real skill, real people, and real consequences. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video that challenges what you think you know about people and situations. These are stories that show you the truth behind the headlines, behind the appearances, behind what we think we know. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been surprised by someone's real abilities? Have you ever assumed something about someone and been completely wrong? Have you ever witnessed real mastery in action? Share your story. Your experience might inspire someone else to look deeper before making assumptions. This story teaches us an important lesson. Never underestimate people. Never assume you know what someone is capable of based on appearance. Never pick a fight with someone you don't know. And always respect real skill and real discipline when you encounter it. The 3 men in this story learned these lessons the hard way. But they learned them. And they'll never forget them. What can we all learn from their mistake? We can learn to be humble. We can learn to respect others. We can learn to recognize that the world is full of skilled people who don't advertise their abilities. We can learn to think before we act. We can learn to respect people's boundaries and their dignity. Steven Seagal showed us what real martial arts looks like. What real discipline looks like. What real mastery looks like. And it's something worth respecting and worth learning from. Thank you for watching this incredible true story. I'll see you in the next video where we continue exploring real stories about real people, real skills, and real consequences. Now go like and subscribe.